Todd, welcome to Peak Conversations. I am so excited to have you here today, and thanks for choosing such a beautiful location in nature. Very excited to dive into your global hospitality experience and glamping. So, let's start with how did your early experiences and passion for adventure set you on this path?
Well, my early sort of passion for the hotel world anyway started when I was very young. I going to a place called Mackinac Island in Michigan with my folks and running around in the lobby and playing in the elevators, and really kind of enjoyed travel ever since then, and then got working into that sector for a long time. But I was always involved in the outdoors, from scouting or camping and fishing with my father, and hunting in the backyard where I lived in Michigan. And so that kind of got me going in terms of loving and appreciating the outdoors and wanting to be involved in the outdoors, and oddly at the same time in the travel and tourism industry. Yeah.
Amazing. And in your book, which everyone should get, The Business of Glamping, you dedicate it to your father, who really instilled in you a love for the outdoors and also history. I'm curious, you're the youngest of four. How was growing up? Did you guys adventure a lot outdoors? Like, what are some specific memories that really inspired you?
Yeah, we didn't travel very much actually growing up. We had a cottage that my aunt had on the Lake Michigan, and we would go to that every summer for about a week. And luckily, my dad was in the real estate business, so we got to go to, again, Mackinac Island and stay at the Grand Hotel when he had a conference. That was really about all the traveling I did as a child. Later, I traveled a lot in my college years, and then later traveled quite extensively. But growing up with my father was always doing something outside, whether it was fishing. We did a lot of hunting together as well. World War II vet, and when he came back from World War II, he just wanted to continue enjoying the outdoors. And he was always a big proponent of conservation as well. And he would always explain to me how the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources in Michigan, worked to keep a really solid level of deer population, and that they wanted as many deer as possible, but they wanted it to be a healthy level. And so he was a fan of hunting, and he knew he had to buy the license, and that hunting license was not just random, but it was calculated to keep a certain population of the deer, so people could still farm, but people could still hunt and whatnot. And then I joined the scouts, and we camped a lot with Boy Scouting.
That's so amazing. Several other guests I've had on Peak Conversations, the early life and inspiration, so much of that has come from how they grew up, their parents. And so it's really cool to see how that inspired you. Going more into your experience and, restaurants, hospitality, I read that you worked in those industries to support yourself through college. What are some of the jobs you had, and what are some of the learnings and experiences?
Great. Yeah, I again, my folks were all about working for your money and for the things that you had. So all my sisters and I, we all had jobs at very young ages. In fact, I told a fib when I was 13 and said I was 14, so I get my work permit to work in a Chinese restaurant in Spring Lake, Michigan, as a dishwasher, and then I became a cook. And then I fibbed again when I was 15 to say I was 16 to get a job as a busboy in a Holiday Inn. And then I worked my way up to be a porter, and then a bar back. And then when I went to college, I was the president's bartender because I'd worked in bars before, and we had a presidential service group for special events and things like that. And I was the bartender, and then just continued working through college as either in a number of different capacities. And then when I went to grad school, they had a bar at Thunderbird in Arizona. It's called The Pub. And when I got there, the manager was graduating, so they needed a new one. And so I went and told the I guess the provost or somebody, I said, I can run a bar. And so I ran the bar at grad school. And when I got out of college, I really enjoyed travel and tourism, and I enjoyed hotels and restaurants, but the operations part I knew wasn't going to really cover my bills. And so I wanted to be a consultant, and I got a job with Laventhal and Horwath and became a consultant in San Diego, doing market studies and feasibility studies. I enjoyed business analysis, so it was a good job for me right out of college. And then that leaded me to Hong Kong, where my boss was moved from San Diego to Hong Kong, and he said, you want to come over here and do it there? So I ended up doing
again,
market studies and valuations all around Asia in the hotel industry.
When I started working, definitely had to lie about the age a little bit, but and also because I was so short, my grandpa made me a stool so I could stand up and see the guests over the counter while I was checking them in. That's an amazing story. And then you got your MBA, international, and that really led to your international work. And so time in Asia, the Middle East, and Australia. What are learnings from those? And I think I read somewhere too that you got your Australian citizenship.
I worked as a consultant, and then eventually I became a developer doing management contract work mainly for the brands Westin, Marriott, Starwood, and then moved from Hong Kong to Singapore, and then from Singapore down to Australia. And I was there for 3 or 4 years, and then Starwood was the company at the time, and they wanted me to move back to Asia, but I'd already been in Asia for 8 or 9 years, and I really was starting a family and enjoying life in Australia. And then, as a good American, I wanted to make sure that if there was a vote to not be under the Queen in Australia, then I could do that. And then, as an American, I would have kind of been involved with 2 rogue states, but also I was getting hired locally, and so I really needed to have a local residence and not be an expat all the time. So myself and my kids, we all became Australian citizen, dual citizens. Now we all have that. And Australia was great. But at the time, 2010, my folks were getting a bit older. I wanted to come here, and I wanted my kids to go to college in the U.S., so made them move back to the U.S. in 2010.
That's such a fascinating story. And I feel like all those worldly experiences, seeing different cultures, and especially in the hospitality sector, really gives you such experience that you cannot learn aside from being there. Right? The transition from traditional hotels to glamping, it sounds like that happened in 2019. You helped grow AutoCamp, which was one of the first leaders to the market. Right? Can you tell us more about that transition and what brought you to glamping?
Sure. From 2010 to 2019, I was working a lot in independent lifestyle and boutique hotels, and our brands that I was working with, which was Commune and Two Roads, the Thompson brand, and Joie de Vivre, which you know from San Francisco here, and Alila, which you might know from Asia, they all got sold to Hyatt. So I took a little time. I'd been working, I think, since I was in 5th grade, and so I was ready to take a little break, and so I was able to do that. I did kind of a mini retirement. At the time, I was providing some pro bono consulting to AutoCamp. A good friend of mine provided their funding, Series B funding. It's about $115 million, and he arranged that. And he said, hey, they're not growing as fast as they should be. Can you go help them out? And so I was helping the CEO on a growth strategy. And then they just said, can you just join? And I said, okay, but I'm going to study the sector a little bit before we get too deep into the growth strategy. And I studied outdoor hospitality, mostly in the U.S., and really kind of fell in love with what was going on. It was a lot like what was happening 20 years earlier in the independent lifestyle and boutique sector, where people from outside of the industry were coming in to do hospitality in the outdoors, and they were coming up with really innovative ideas and ways of doing it. And that really excited me, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I joined AutoCamp, and then COVID happened, and they restructured, and they became my first client. So I started consulting to the industry, both helping site developers and brands to grow, and investors in looking at the various opportunities in outdoor hospitality.
That's so exciting, especially as you see so many brands move toward the outdoor experience and glamping, and there are just so many that exist today that many don't even know of, and that's kind of the beauty of it too. Not big brands, you get that more of that experience. And so back to the incredible book that you wrote, the business of glamping. You cover a ton of things, from thinking about opening a glamping business to land and everything in between. Would you say that the market for glamping is still growing, or how have things shifted since 2019?
The original thought was that back looking in the year 2020 or 2019, was that in 3 to 5 years, there would probably be a scaling up of a number of brands and then a consolidation, just as exactly what happened in the independent lifestyle boutique and also micro hotels and any extended stay hotels. Eventually, the big companies would come in and acquire this new sector or brands within this new sector. And to a certain extent, that has happened. Marriott just bought a getaway house, which is now called Postcard Cabins. So it's happened a little bit. The issue, though, with growing an outdoor hospitality brand in the last 5 years has been two main issues. One is that the cost of developing the properties has been more than what people originally, I think, thought it would be. It wasn't just, throw $1,000 tent out on a platform and get going. It was, much more expensive than that, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per key to develop. That was the first impediment. So, and money wasn't really there, to be honest, either debt or equity. And the interest rates went up so much that slowed things down. The other thing is that, when a big company gets into a brand like that, they really want scale. They need to have it be 50, 80, 100 units, or at least a pathway to getting to those numbers. And the thing with outdoor hospitality is it tends to be a smaller product. It tends to be, you know, sub 100 rooms, let's say, and there's only certain places that they can go. It's not like you can put them anywhere, and there's a lot of local pressure in terms of zoning and permits and entitlements to be able to develop in these places. In fact, one of the chapters I think is there called "Are We Entitled to Entitlements?" And it's really that some of the places where you want to put your glamping are quite sensitive. There might be traffic issues, there's workforce housing issues, all of these things, and so the growth hasn't happened as much as I thought it would, and therefore the demand still is outpacing the supply quite strongly in most places. There was a blip in 2023 when a lot of people wanted to go overseas after COVID, but it's coming back again. So strong demand for the product, but really hard to get new supply in.
I think that is such a helpful insight for people looking to get into it. And for those who are interested in potentially, starting a glamping business, are you still offering consulting services around that? And if so, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
That's great. Yeah, I'll answer one other question there, which is in terms of, looking to get into it, what advice would I provide around that? And I've always used the line of demarcation at 20 units. So below 20 units, if you're going to develop them, is really a lifestyle. That's going to be the developer, the sponsor, getting in there and having to clean bathrooms and take care of the guests. And it's really a lifestyle kind of opportunity. More than 20 units is starts to be a business. And now you might have a manager that can be full-time, and you can afford that type of infrastructure because you've got enough money coming in out of 20 units. That's kind of the line of demarcation. Yeah, I still do consulting on an ad hoc basis. I have a company called Monterre Hospitality Advisors, and Monterre is on the websites, Montare, and you can get a hold of me there if you need to.
Great. Well, that is super helpful, and I'm sure a bunch of people will be reaching out to you. Part of this podcast, I interview people who their businesses revolve around the outdoors, but they also deeply connect with nature. You're known to be an avid fly fisherman, and you have a, 1953 Airstream, and you split your time between Mill Valley, where we're at now, and Bend, Oregon, where I used to live. And nature, like, just so incredible. How would you say that impacts your professional life?
So I think one thing that nature tends to do to you or enforce is it really makes you slow down. Nature works at a very slow pace. Things grow over the summer, and then they go away, and then they come back again. And nature just works slower than what we're used to. And I think it's a really good balancing point for us. It's to stop and tell you, hey, just slow down. Like, you can't envelop all this nature in 2 minutes and then be satisfied. You have to sit and let it talk to you, let it embrace you, you embrace it, whatever you need to do. But it forces you to slow down. And I think that, as I've always believed in the balance between high tech and high touch. So as technology, which we're covered in technology right now and dealing with a little bit of it today, as technology continues to advance, and we haven't even seen, right, the tip of the iceberg in terms of AI, right? So technology is hurtling so fast that our physical being, really mentally and physically, we can't deal with it very well. And so you have to balance it out with a lot of touch. And I think that's part of the reason why outdoor hospitality and people really embracing the outdoors is growing so much over the last 5 to 10 to 15 years, not just because Gen Z appreciates, experiences over material things, and not just because you've got technology. You can go on HipCamp or the Dirt or Airbnb and book something in the outdoors, which is great. I think it's really people are craving that balance, that high tech, high touch balance. And getting out in nature is certainly, when you're taking a hike or a walk or canoeing or swimming or doing something outside, touching nature gives you that balance.
That was so beautifully said, and I agree. Nature has a way of slowing you down, whether you like it or not, and building resilience, and it's so special. What's next for you? Are you planning to write another book?
No plans right now on another book, but I'm currently working with Aramark Destinations, and which is one of the largest concessionaires of national parks around the country, and just working with them to refine their growth strategy in areas that are not in national parks, but still very much outdoor and nature forward destinations. And so that's what I'm doing right now, is trying to help them grow that footprint.
Super exciting. What piece of advice could you give to entrepreneurs who are looking to pair their passion, like nature, with their professional life, just getting started or wanting to make that transition?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think there's two answers there. The one answer is, if your passion is something that that can afford a living, then great. That's fine. But I wouldn't say that whole scale, just follow your passion and that's it. I think having a vocation or a career that plays to your talents, if you can find that where you're needed and you have meaning in your work, because work can give you meaning and meaning can give you happiness. And then if you do your passions on the side, if you're lucky enough that your passion pays well, and you can find a job in your passion, then great. And if you can angle your career towards something that you're interested in or you're passionate about, then that also helps. But I wouldn't sacrifice a living only for your passions, I suppose is what I would say. Yeah, you gotta make some money and have a job. That's the best social program is always a job.
Thank you so much for your time today. This has been amazing. I think a lot of people will be ordering your book to learn more and reaching out. I always like to end every episode with a quote that you like to live by, or a mantra.
Life is short, so eat it up with a big, big spoon.
Haven't heard that one before. Love it. Thank you so much.